Rachel Williamson, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, you've written some articles that I'd love to delve more into and get some insight into what's happening in the world of wind in particular. Um, and so I wanted to start off with the federal decision on contested large wind project, which has been delayed for the sixth time. The Robbins Island wind project is a proposed 900 megawatt development in the northwest of Tasmania, and it has experienced its sixth delay in federal approval, with its new decision deadline set for June of this year. Now, we've seen a lot of changes happen with this development, but with this postponement, it also follows the recent federal election and the subsequent cabinet reshuffling, where the environmental portfolio moved from Tanya to Murray Watt. There's a lot of stuff happening here. Can you give me some details as to what's happening, why it might be happening, and what your general thoughts are?
Well, this is a project that has been stuck in planning hell since 2017. And that's just the federal planning hell, the EPBC process. And it's because it is a huge project, but at the same time, it's on an island. So Robbins Island. So it's got to get a lot of infrastructure to the island and build a lot of infrastructure on the island in order to get, first of all, to build the project, but also to get the electricity to Tasmania and then ultimately to the mainland, to mainland Australia. So it's been very controversial environmentally. The original legal opposition to this project came a few years ago after the state planning department said, okay, we're going to approve it. It's all good, but you do need to shut down for 5 months a year when the very critically endangered orange-bellied parrot migrates. This is a parrot this is potentially an apocryphal story, but has been taken to the mainland a couple of times by Qantas jet in order to just continue the population of the species. So that is how critically endangered it is. It has had help. The Circular Head Coastal Awareness Network is the organisation that's been fighting it, and they fought that decision. They've taken the following decision to the Supreme Court of Tasmania, and in February they lost. But they have now promised to fight on through the EPBC process.
And how do we think? So Tanya Plibersek was overseeing this particular project, at least in terms of the portfolio. Are we going to see a transition from how this is overseen now that it's with Murray Watt? Do you think there's going to be much of a difference politically when it comes to addressing this development site?
Well, ministers take advice from the department, and the department has been looking at this for a very long time. So he will be taking advice on this, advice that potentially has already been prepared but was held over till after the election. But because this is such a complicated project, it's hard to say which way he will go. There's a chance that he says, I'm using this to make my mark on the portfolio, and I'm going to, and whichever way he decides to go will be the way that it goes. But what many people and many sort of regular people don't understand is that planning processes follow policy, and they follow regulations, and they follow legislation. So if a project is within all of these boundaries, there's a good chance it can get up. Whether it is completely on the nose with a local community or not.
Wow. All right. Well, we'll watch that and we'll see what happens, because this is quite interesting. Come June, I'm sure we'll have an answer, or there might be another delay. Who knows? But it will be interesting to see where this goes. And now that there is a different environmental minister in this, what could actually be different, or what might exactly be the same. Who knows?
It will certainly be a way for him to plant his flag in the sand and be able to say, this is the sort of environmental minister that I'm going to be.
Now, you wrote another article called Taking Down Wind Turbines Can Be an Explosive Issue, but Australia is helping to spearhead solutions. Now, I actually did not know anything about taking down old wind turbines. And it wasn't until I read your article that it was literally explosive. It was something that I had not even imagined that it could be.
Neither had I.
Well, in the article, you were specifically writing about Pacific Blue's 18.2 megawatt wind farm in Victoria and how that is slated for decommissioning in 2027. This is both a case study into exploring how we dismantle sustainability practices, but also where we put these things and thinking about them more in their life cycle and what it means to start a development and then to understand how it's going to end. Can you tell me more about this? Because, yeah, it's a really interesting topic and it's not something I've thought about.
Well, let's start with what you can actually do with a wind farm at the end of its life. So there are about 85 wind farms due to be coming to the end of their life before 2045. That's from a Reliance report that's coming out in about a month or so. You can repower them, which is basically doing the whole project all over again, and but putting brand new wind turbines on there. And this comes with a whole heap of other issues, which we're not going to talk about right now. You can tinker with it, give it an extra 5-10 years of life, and this is what a wind farm down in Tasmania is doing on King Island, I believe. Or you can completely decommission it. Now, Codrington, which is out near Portland in the west of Victoria. Now, this is just going to be too expensive, according to Pacific Blue, to repower. So they've said, nope, we're going to take it out. The recycling issue is a huge one for old renewable energy projects. And for wind projects in particular, you've got a few different elements at play. You can recycle about 90 to 95% of a turbine. It's just a steel tower with some electronics, a heap of concrete, and depending on what your agreement with the landowner says, take up some roads, take out some cables, and remove the substation. So there's that. That's totally doable. Australia has all of the recycling facilities and companies that it needs in order to do this. But then you've got the blades. They are a bit of an issue because they're made of something called a composite material. And what a composite material is it's bits of fiberglass mixed with resin, mixed with a few other things. And there's a whole heap of layers of them. And they're all squashed together. But it's very difficult to recycle because if you recycle something, you want the pure material. And so somehow you've got to take all of these tiny fiberglass fibers, and separate them from the resin and so on. And you can do this with chemical or heat processing, but these are pretty new and they're expensive. So what is probably going to happen in Australia, I'm speculating here, obviously, but this is the option that seems to come up most often, is basically tearing them apart and then pounding them into tiny little pieces and then adding them to cement. And so there are some murmurs that perhaps Australia should change its concrete standard to allow this additive to be included in concrete, and so it can form part of these blades can be recycled into apartment buildings or foundations for other wind farms and so on. Exploding wind turbines, which I have this vision of just watching, hundreds of wind turbines.
I hope we live stream it. Like, it's one of those things that you think, wow, that would be crazy to witness.
I know, it'd be amazing, wouldn't it? However, Pacific Blue has come out and said, we are absolutely not doing that. We're categorically not going to blow up any wind turbines. We're not even going to push them over so they collapse. We're going to be very delicately disassemble them with a crane, which, given the sensitivity around this wind farm, which is the biggest to date to be decommissioned. So there is Pacific Blue is already fending off rumors of things like, oh, you're going to bury the blades in a sand dune. Obviously, that would be illegal, so they can't do that. But there's all these rumors flying around, as it always happens in the renewables sector, and so they're being very careful and saying we're going to be doing this in the most socially responsible, environmentally responsible manner as we can, because they have to set the bar. They have to set best practices to what's going to come next. And if they don't, they're going to cop so much flack. And so they're being very careful about this. And they've said, we're going to use the cranes to take them down. But what was put to them were these three options. And that was, you can use the crane. It's expensive because cranes are very expensive. That heavy equipment is all very expensive to hire, keep on site. But what you can also do is you can cut a wedge out of the bottom of the tower and then just tip it over. Or you can put explosives in the base and effectively implode it. And these were the three options put to Pacific Blue by a consultant called Everose, and which, after they did some research about how developers and owners take down wind turbines overseas. What is interesting is that the explosive collapse method has been used in Australia before, and you could see that it could actually be quite useful in some scenarios. In 2021, AGL had to take down one turbine at its new Cooper's Gap at the time, wind farm, because it had a problem with the nacelle. And so the way it took it down was using the explosive collapse method. This wind farm, parts of it are quite hilly. You could imagine a time where getting a crane up there would be quite difficult, especially if it's in the wet season and you say, okay, we just need to get this thing down without any heavy equipment, without putting anyone at risk because of that heavy equipment getting stuck on that ridge somewhere. So you could see how that would actually be quite useful. But you can also see why a company like Pacific Blue might be reluctant to do that when they have a wind farm on very lush farmland that's also quite close to some roads and people can see it. The Courier Mail, a News Corp newspaper, ran a couple of very excitable stories about it at the time, asking whether the Queensland Energy Minister knew about this and, offering up a lot of shock that anyone would blow up a wind turbine to bring it down. There is precedent for a moral panic to come from using more robust methods to bring down a turbine.
With an aging wind turbine, are there parts that age quicker than other parts? Is this a parts issue? Like, is this something where, you don't necessarily have to age the entire farm, but you're able to, I guess, just identify certain areas that, maybe need more attention in 5-10 years' time?
So my understanding is that a lot of wind farms are oversized in Australia. So they're built slightly larger than the capacity. The turbines are built slightly larger than the capacity they're actually going to run at to give them an extra 10 years of life. But in the meantime, you've got all of your little parts within the box at the top of the tower. And this is where, you've got all your electrical bits and pieces. Things like bearings. These things all just run out. This is ongoing maintenance. But the issue is that in, let's say, 30 years' time, you've got a wind farm that starts today. Is there going to be someone who can still make that part in the quantities to the spec that you as an owner need to give it another X years of life. And so this is one of the issues that wind farm operators have to come up against is, do you want to spend that much money in order to get another 10 years of life out? Or do you want to just say, well, we're just going to take it down because we can actually make some money from the steel, from the towers, and in 30 years' time, potentially you can make some money out of the blades as well, depending on how it is that we've figured out, or what it is we've figured out to do with them. So this is not like, say, a coal mine where this is an ongoing cost to society forever. This is a project that can be removed and can generate some revenue in the interim.
That's a really interesting concept. I haven't thought about it. I think when I think about energy, because it is just that, I guess, cold mindset of it will ultimately just, kind of take in a way from the resources around and just also from society. But how when you do decommission a wind farm, that it actually can go back into the local community, or like if these things are sold or if it is going into concrete, depending on those standards, that there are many different ways for the wind turbine farm to live on in different ways and to reincarnate itself, which is an interesting way to think about energy and that life cycle that I guess we've been talking about.
This is the ideal. There are going to be instances where wind and solar farms fall well below that ideal. And this is actually why a set of guidelines, best practice guidelines or framework or some kind of any regulation that is aimed at decommissioning is probably necessary. So, if Pacific Blue is trying to set, a high bar with what it's doing because all eyes are on it, perhaps we need some regulation or something to set the bare minimum to prevent problems happening in the future. When, these 85 wind farms and, a horde of solar farms start to come to the end of their lives.
And are we seeing any of those regulations in their planning stage, in their development stage? Is there any word on the street of things like this? Because, solar farms and wind farms, they aren't a unheard of concept. They do exist and they are coming to the end of their life in many ways. So I would think that there is some type of attention given to regulating this, but you let me know. Do you know anything?
I haven't heard anything about federal or state moves to regulate or create state-led guidelines around decommissioning. The New South Wales Wind Energy Guide has a section on decommissioning. It is only 4 pages out of 50 odd, but it does have a sort of a bare minimum section as to some expectations.
Well, Rachel Williamson, thank you so much for joining me today and telling me about wind and wind farms, wind turbines, and all of the ways that they are seen in local communities to federal and state levels of how do we actually, take them out and send them on to better and brighter things. I really appreciate this conversation. It's helped me understand and put things into context. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.